Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Tall, pale humanoid approaches shocked camper at Ovens National Park, Nova Scotia. Before this incident, I had never had a paranormal experience in my life. That being said, my boyfriend seems to have enough for the both of us. We went camping in the early fall of 2016 at Ovens National Park, Nova Scotia. We had just arrived back from spending the summer in Western Canada and hadn't seen each other in 4 months. So we decided to spend some time together and go camping with another couple that were close friends of ours. We booked the cheapest cabin at the campground for 2 nights and headed out. The first day we spent there was pretty uneventful. To give some context, the park is famous for its sea caves that are carved into the rocky cliffs of the Nova Scotian East Shore. The first day we hiked the trail that overlooked the caves, or the ovens as they were called, and we were able to go down into some of them. That night we had a campfire, but turned in early. So we sat inside this small cabin and started playing cards. My boyfriend was being a sore loser and seemed to be acting kind of strange. He abruptly said he was going for a walk and left the cabin. I was pretty annoyed and just let him go for a while and didn't chase him. After about half an hour I started to get a bit anxious and called his cell. This is where things started to get really weird. He didn't answer at first, but he called me back right away. When I answered he seemed to have calmed down a bit, and I asked him where he was. He said he was sitting on a bench on the trail, then he asked where I was. This confused me a bit because I hadn't left the cabin since he left, and I wasn't likely to since I'm terrified of the dark. I told him this and this suddenly freaked him out. He said he was coming back to the cabin. It was weird because he's generally pretty level-headed and hard to actually scare. So after about 2 to 3 minutes I hear running footsteps coming to the cabin, and my boyfriend comes tearing through the door. Then this is what he told me. He had walked out to the trails to get some fresh air and sat down on one of the benches to look out at the ocean. The moon was pretty bright that night, so everything was illuminated pretty well. Then he said he heard someone walking by, and he saw this really tall and pale figure stop and look at him, and then continue on. For some reason he assumed this was me coming to look for him, and that's when I called him and told him I was in the cabin. He said that in retrospect, the figure was inhumanly tall and pale, and couldn't possibly be a person. He was not himself for the rest of the night and didn't seem normal until lunch the next day. Do you have any idea about what this might have been? LB.
Pale crawler humanoid encounter in Dewitt County, Texas. This encounter took place on January 12, 2019 in Dewitt County, Texas. To be honest, I chose to go out on this particular night because my town was having a little ghost tour at the local haunted hospital. I was lonely and wanted to at least see others having fun. It was 8 p.m. when I left the house and planned to be back within an hour. I have a routine of circling my town in the evening because I just like patrolling, and there's always things creeping about after nightfall. I made my way to the haunted hospital, and once I got there I saw flashlights inside the windows and heard laughter. Seeing others have fun made me smile and got rid of some of the loneliness I was feeling. This was the halfway point of my walk and I started my second half heading home now. There were some woods on the opposite side of town now, but nothing impressive until I got to the last quarter of my walk. Now I was passing the baseball field on my left with a large wheat field on my right. This wheat field used to be a large extension of the woods, but was cleared out for growing wheat. I continued again and crossed the small bridge that went over a creek and past another section of woods. I was now headed towards the old metal building that has recently been turned into a place for making gates and fences. It was about 9 p.m. now. This building had 2 small white houses beside it and a stretch of dirt road wrapping around the backside of it before returning to normal asphalt road. Now at night this place seems pretty scary, but this was one of my favorite places to hang out at night and is a normal path I take my walks through. As I was coming up to the dirt road I saw a very tall 8 to 10 foot pale figure with lanky arms almost dragging the ground about 40 feet ahead of me briskly walk from the white houses to the woods. I stopped walking. After a few minutes of standing there I convinced myself to continue walking forward. I mean, I was an adventurous person, and there's no way I was just going to turn tail and go home when I just saw something so odd and out of place. Not even 15 seconds into walking forward, this sudden heavy sense of dread overcame me like a giant weight crashing down on my shoulders. My instincts were telling me something was really wrong. I turned my iPhone light on and shined it at the woods. Nothing. I kept walking while keeping my head on a swivel, looking in all directions to keep my surroundings in check. About the 5th or 6th time I looked at the woods, I saw it. A huge bleached white humanoid figure crouched on all fours. It was easily still 5 to 6 feet tall, even though it was bent over. Its black eyes paralyzed me. It had a big round bald head and an extremely emaciated body, void of all hair, with very long, almost dislocated looking arms and legs. Its legs were like a flamingo bird's at the knee as it bent backwards instead of forward. I took all this in a matter of seconds. Suddenly it reminded me of a praying mantis when it swayed back and forth while staring, as if deciding whether to attack or not. This broke me out of my trance and I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I had ran a block. Out of breath and scared as heck, I finally took a glance back. I didn't see anything in sight. I didn't hear it chase me either. Maybe it was just stalking those people in those 2 little white houses and was waiting for me to go away to go back to its business. Maybe it didn't want anything to do with me. But that wasn't the end. I got home, took a shower, and turned out the lights before I hopped in bed when suddenly there was something tapping on my window. Tap tap tap. 3 taps and nothing else. I laid in my bed that night wondering whether it had followed me home or not. A string of bad luck ensued afterwards the following weeks. I was constantly burning stuff on the stove that was relatively easy to make, and I was an excellent cook on top of that. My dog started going nuts at night, growling and barking at night in the living room and at the front door, which she has never ever done, as she is the quietest, sweetest dog you'll ever meet. And finally I got deathly sick for 3 weeks straight, with no sure sign of what I had gotten. 103 fever, vomiting with blood, diarrhea with blood, sneezing, coughing, sore throat, migraines, nerve spasms, stuffy and dry nose, it changed constantly, aching all over, really especially in my bones, etc. I've had smaller strings of bad luck before, after hearing its mimicry trying to lure me into the forest or seeing it one other time, but I didn't see any details, but nothing ever this extreme. I don't go into the woods alone anymore. KN.
Tall pale-skinned humanoid encountered in Willow Creek, California. I saw a tall pale-skinned being in my grandparents' yard in Willow Creek, California in 1994. I had grandparents, Dad's father and stepmother, who lived in Willow Creek until their respective passing in the early 2000s. Before then my dad, sister, and I would visit at least once or twice in the summer, and sometimes for a Thanksgiving or Christmas. We lived in San Jose, California at the time, which is an 8-hour drive away. We loved going to hike in the surrounding forests and play in the Trinity River. We grew up hearing about Bigfoot. The famous Patterson video was shot in the area, and the town is Bigfoot tourist heavy, but we were taught to watch out the very real pumas and bears. I need to explain a bit about how my grandparents' house was laid out for some aspects of this story. They had a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house set at the corner of 2 streets. The road into the neighborhood off the main road ran along the backyard, and the house ran along the other road off of that road. Several houses ran each side of the street, and a house sat behind their yard. Chain link fencing 6 feet tall went around their backyard, and most neighbors' yards instead of solid wood fencing, so you can see into most yards. From the street and their house, it slopes down into the backyard and neighbor's yard by roughly 10 feet in total. Their backyard was mostly just grass and weeds, with a small semi-growing garden near the neighbor's fence line, and a big tree, maybe oak of some kind, next to and partially over the solarium. They had a raised deck running the length of the back of the house with stairs down into the yard at one end, and a solarium off their kitchen at the other end. Inside the house, the kitchen and dining room are immediately next to each other, with the living room and front door next to it. At the back of the living room is a short hall with master bedroom behind the kitchen and along the wall with the deck on one side, and the bathroom and guest room along the wall facing the side street on the other side. Grandparents of course got their master bedroom, Dad would take the guest room, and my sister and I would sleep in the living room in winter or in the solarium if it was summer. This story takes place in mid-August 1994. One last summer trip before school started in a couple weeks at the request of my sister for her 9th birthday earlier that month. I was 11 at the time. We left early to get there before dinner so Dad could nap from the drive a bit, while me and Sis went down to the portion of the Trinity River that ran at the very back of the neighborhood. The afternoon and evening went as usual. That night, we went to sleep in the solarium as was custom for summer trips. At some point in the night, I woke up. No real reason, not even to go to the bathroom. I just have always done that from time to time, even still. I did what I usually do and stared up at the stars and moon, around half visible, couldn't tell you if it was waxing or waning. All of a sudden, I got an intense feeling of dread that skipped fight or flight to straight, freeze or you're dead. After some time, most likely just a minute or two, I turned my head to the side to look into the yard. I had to turn to my side and lift myself a bit to get a better look, but the source of my feeling was impossible to miss. Standing at the bottom of the yard next to the neighbor's fence line stood a tall skinny creature with skin the color of the moon. It had no hair on its head or anywhere else that I could see. Its eyes were shiny white with a reflective quality, but not bright like a bright light was shining on them right then. Just moonlight. Its face had human features, but seemed squished flatter. Its arms seemed really long, but that could be just because it was really tall. The chain link fence came up to its armpits, so it had to be around 7 to 8 feet tall. Not enough to just step over the fencing, but I didn't hear it climb over, unless it had been in the yard before I woke up, and just didn't get the dread feeling until later. Its body had dirty brown dark gray looking rags over its chest, and around its hips, cover its crotch. It was looking right at me. I got scared and ducked down into my sleeping bag as far as I could. My sister has always been a heavy sleeper, and I didn't want her to wake up for this anyway. Next thing I hear heavy steps on the deck coming towards the solarium. There's a wood door with a screened window in the top of it, not opened at the time as far as I can remember. All was quiet for a while, so I peeked out through a small fold of the sleeping bag. Through one of the bottom windows of the solarium next to the door I saw its pale large feet. The skin was rough, and the toes were gnarled with dirty nails. I curled up trying not to make a sound or move much. The bag was getting stuffy. Next thing I know my dad is gently moving me with his foot asking if I was cold because I was still huddled down into the bag. I looked around kind of disoriented. There was no evidence of that creature from the night before. No marks or footprints or bent fencing. My dad was a huge skeptic of anything paranormal, cryptic, and otherworldly, but I told him anyways. He of course blew it off as a dream. Sis, being a deep sleeper, didn't notice anything. I asked my grandparents if they heard or felt the thumping on the deck, which would have been along their bedroom wall. Nope. Both seemed weirded out by my story, and my grandma later privately told me, there's lots of strange things up here. That's why we avoid being out at night. She wouldn't elaborate though. It's obviously not a classic Bigfoot, but I don't know what it is. I've wanted to ask someone from the Hoopa Native Americans up there, but I haven't yet. I've never seen anything like it since. Although I have experienced plenty of paranormal things, but those are different stories. AD.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.